Part 86. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 851. After the three people left, only Rong Yu, Xiejin, and Xian Yuanyao were left in the palace, as well as the palace attendants standing beside them. Rest in the imperial capital for 2 days, and then I will give you a long vacation and go back to Huainan first, Rong Yu said, sorting out the files on the case and reviewing them one by one. You two send a message to the king of Huainan. Huainan ask him to prepare a plan for the deployment of troops and horses. Long vacation? Xiejin suddenly became energetic. Thinking of being able to travel alone with Xian Yuanyao again, he felt that there was no harm in being more diligent on weekdays. Although there were official duties during the holidays, as long as it was a holiday, it proved that the official duties were not urgent and they could go ahead. Take it easy and relax. This time from the imperial capital to Huainan, he must go around with Yao Yao, visit the mountains and water, and enjoy the beautiful scenery of the two people's world away from the hustle and bustle. Xian Yuanyao responded, do you need your father to come to the imperial capital in person? Rong Yu said in a calm voice, it will come sooner or later. The specific placement of soldiers and horses must be discussed face to face between the monarch and his ministers, and it cannot be solved perfectly with one twist. Your Majesty, I have something to think about. Xian Yuanyao thought for a while and frowned slightly. The 5,000 people that your Majesty brought from Dazhu before have been away from Dazhu for too long. I think we can arrange to let them go. They go home to visit their relatives for a while and meet their relatives. Or just let them go. At first, he thought that the 5,000 soldiers and horses were only staying in Dongling temporarily. Even when they merged with the Black Obsidian Army, Xian Yuanyao did not think that they would stay for so long. In the past few years, the 5,000 soldiers had never returned to Dazhu. Xian Yuanyao wanted to mention it before, but the Lord gave him 2 years to build the king's army. He didn't dare to speak until the task was completed. After the Lord reviewed it, South Vietnam happened to be provocative again, and this matter has been delayed until now. Rong Yu said calmly, these 5,000 people were specially selected when they came to Dongling with me. Ah! Xian Yuanyao was stunned. Some of them are orphans with no father or mother, and some of them are from poor families with many brothers and sisters. The family cannot afford to raise these children. They entered the military camp when they were 14 or 15 years old. They have good talents and can endure hardships and stand hard work. This king will treat them transferred to the Suanjia army for special training. After a slight pause in his tone, Rong Yu continued, except for occasionally sending some money back, they rarely go home. Before coming to Tangling, they were all prepared to stay in Tangling for a long time. Xian Yuanyao was silent, so they were all willing? Rong Yu was silent for a moment, but while you are doing a good job this time, you can go back and ask who wants to go back to visit relatives in your hometown and consider making arrangements. Xian Yuanyao nodded, yes. The war in South Vietnam was enough to shock other countries. Within a few years, there should be no more people seeking death, Rong Yu said calmly. After returning from Huainan, you started to train new recruits with all your strength. The juveniles are no better than adults. The initial training intensity is appropriate. Focus on training. You can also make a training plan for me to take a look at later. Yes, Xian Yuanyao nodded obediently, and then looked at Rong Yu with some hesitation. Your Majesty. Rong Yu hummed, what's the matter? Xian Yuanyao was silent for a moment, then turned to look at Xiejin. You go out first. As soon as these words came out, not only Xiejin was stunned, but also Rong Yu glanced at Xian Yuanyao in surprise, not understanding what this person was trying to do. Yao Yao. Xiejin frowned, what words can't I listen to? Xian Yuanyao insisted, get out. Xiejin sighed, saluted Rong Yu, and left. Rong Yu didn't say anything. He picked up the teacup and took a sip. Everyone else should go out too. The palace people bowed their eyebrows and left. Xian Yuanyao raised his eyes slightly and looked at Rong Yu, who was sitting behind the case. He rolled the sentence on the tip of his tongue several times before he said bravely, "My lord, after returning to Huainan this time, I want to bring my younger brother here." Rong Yu raised her eyes and looked at him without saying a word. "I and Ajin have no children, so we can bring our younger brother as a son." Xian Yuanyao hesitated for a moment, but under Rong Yu's lightning eyes, he finally chose to tell the truth. "We can also let Huai'er grow up with the prince. In the future, the idea of loyalty to the emperor will be more ingrained. Otherwise, far away in Huainan, the relationship between Huai'er and the prince will be weak. If he grows up and holds a heavy army, I will be worried." "It's self-evident what to worry about," Rong Yu said calmly. "Have you told Xiejin these words?" "No." Xian Yuanyao shook his head quickly. "I just suddenly thought of this when I heard the master talk about the Huainan army's resettlement plan. He has followed Rong Yu for many years and is familiar with his temperament, so he dares to say these words bluntly. He can only say it bluntly. What his master hates most is having to make 18 turns to say something." In addition to being loyal to the emperor, Xian Yuanyao also considered the fate of the Huainan palace. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 852. At the moment, there was no one else in the Qinzhen hall except him and Rong Yu, so Xian Yuanyao was not worried about being overheard by others. Walking to Rong Yu's side, Xian Yuanyao raised his hand to pinch his master's shoulders and neck, and said in a humble and steady voice, "My father is the Prince of Dongling. He grew up in the imperial city since he was a child. He was influenced by the idea of loyalty to the emperor. He has a father-son relationship with his grandfather, and he is upright and persevering, so he will not have any other thoughts. I came to the master at the age of 13, and I have worn out my youthful edge. I have been trained by the master for 5 years. In addition to having a general understanding of the master's temperament and character, I also respect the master and dare not have other thoughts. The master also knows me very well, so because the master trusts me, he has no scruples about giving me power. But my younger brother is different. Huainan is far away from the capital. Even if my father teaches him with all his heart and teaches him to be loyal to the king and the country, without that friendship, loyalty will always be discounted." Speaking of this, Xian Yuanyao pursed his lips. "I am not afraid of offending the master. If I had not had the experience of being with the master for 5 years, I might not be so convinced by the return of Her Majesty the Queen and the Regent today. Loyalty is definitely there. After all, he has been taught the idea of loyalty to the king since he was a child, and it is impossible for him to have any rebellious thoughts casually. However, even if he is loyal, he only maintains the most basic way of monarch and minister, abides by the royal laws such as etiquette, palace rules and laws, but the monarch and minister will never give up power and trust as unscrupulously as they are now. The king values trust, and the minister is loyal and unwavering. He is not suspicious because of military power, and is not defensive because of military merit. Only pure and unreserved trust is the most comfortable monarch-minister friendship. Far away from the imperial city, the king has no idea about the temperament of the generals who hold military power, so how can he talk about trust? There is no friendship between the king and his subjects, so how can they be close to each other? Once the seeds of suspicion are planted, under the supreme power of the emperor, it can only end with killing in many cases. Xian Yuanyao is more concerned about the fate of the Huainan palace. After all, there will be too many loyal ministers and generals around the king, but the Huainan palace has only his younger brother to inherit the bloodline. Once there is a rift between the king and his subjects in the future, the entire Huainan palace will be implicated. He also doesn't care about letting Rong Yu know his true thoughts. Silence lasted for a moment. Xian Yuanyao spoke again. "I hope that in 20 years, the prince and my brother will be like the master and me, willing to be driven because of their sincere submission, and will be loyal to this person for the rest of their lives." Even if they are torn to pieces, they will never have any other thoughts. Father will teach with all his heart. Hwayer's future and responsibilities after he grows up have been planned. I also know that the prince will be a wise ruler after being taught by the master. It's just that I am narrow-minded. Military power is always something that cannot eliminate risks. I can't help but have some sense of crisis. He glanced at Rong Yu. He had said these words very seriously and respectfully before. Until the end, his voice was a bit flattering. The master should understand my concerns. This was the first time he really spoke such a long paragraph of his heart in front of Rong Yu without reservation, for the sake of his brother's future. Even if these words were not said so carefully, Rong Yu would not be unable to understand what he meant, but Xian Yuanyao still said it, expressing all his thoughts frankly, and firmly believed that his master would definitely meet his request. Rong Yu drank tea with a calm expression, showing no emotion. Xian Yuanyao looked at his profile. Master. Rong Yu frowned slightly. If you want to press hard. Didn't you eat? Xian Yuanyao was stunned for a moment, then lowered his eyebrows and eyes and added a little strength. His expression was focused and his technique was skillful, making Rong Yu's shoulders and neck feel particularly comfortable. Due to the war in South Vietnam, there have been too many government affairs. The master should be tired, Xian Yuanyao said. The weather was cold before the new year. Is the master feeling unwell? Has the root of the disease recurred? With Chu Nanyi here, you don't have to worry. Rong Yu lowered his brows to review the memorials. Has your father agreed to the decision to bring Xian Yuanhui to the imperial capital? My father hasn't said anything yet, Xian Yuanyao said. We have to wait for the master's consent first. Why did you drive Xiejin out just now? Xian Yuanyao coughed lightly. If he stayed here, I really couldn't open my mouth to say what I said just now. I thought you were avoiding him. That's not the case, Xian Yuanyao told the truth. I can talk to him almost everything now. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 853. Rong Yu was silent for a moment, frowning slightly. This king has understood some truths over the years. Ah, Xian Yuanyao raised his eyes in surprise, and instantly listened attentively. What does the master want to say? It's hard to change one's nature. Rong Yu's tone was calm. You have been with this king for 5 years, and you have learned a lot of military strategies, but your temperament has never changed. It's also thanks to Xiejin's sincerity. Otherwise, you would have been sold by him someday, and I'm afraid you would have to count silver for him with gratitude. Xian Yuanyao's expression froze, and he didn't know how to react. After a long silence, he raised his hand and touched his nose, muttering in a low voice, Am I that stupid? He admitted that Xiejin was smart and cunning, but he didn't really let others fool him. If Xiejin didn't treat him sincerely, Xian Yuanyao wouldn't be open to him. Since he didn't open his heart, there was naturally no unreserved trust. Even if he was as cunning as a fox, he had to get close to him before he could sell him, right? Go back and have a rest, Rong Yu said calmly. You can arrange the affairs in the military camp yourself, I won't interfere. Yes, Xian Yuanyao said. Goodbye, my lord. Do you have anything to say to Xiejin? What to tell him? Rong Yu raised his eyes slightly. Warn him not to let you down. Xian Yuanyao was stunned, and had no idea how this sentence came out of the cold and majestic Rong Yu's mouth. His handsome face blushed. That's not what I meant. This sentence sounded as if he was a baby who was still breastfeeding and needed someone to protect him. Rong Yu said nothing more, and lowered his eyes to deal with the piles of government affairs. Xian Yuanyao was about to leave, but suddenly thought of something. He turned around and looked at Rong Yu, saying seriously, I haven't changed much in the past few years, but the master's temperament has obviously softened a lot. I think this is due to the love of Her Majesty the Queen for the master. The cold-faced evil spirit could not help but melt under the tenderness, which made people sigh that the power of love is more powerful than the iron horse. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Xian Yuanyao would not have believed that the master who was guarding the great surroundings back then and the master who was now cold and warm were the same person. Rong Yu was silent. After Xian Yuanyao finished speaking, he said goodbye and turned around and walked away quickly, leaving Rong Yu alone. After listening to that sentence, he was silent for a long time. Unable to read the memorials piled on the imperial desk, Rong Yu stood up and walked out of the Kinzen Hall. Standing on the steps of the hall, he saw the backs of Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao walking away. The two were very close, talking as they walked. At a distance not too far, Xiejin could hear him asking in a low voice, "What did Yao Yao say to the master just now? Why did they kick me out? There must be a reason for kicking you out. Why are you asking? Yao Yao treats me as an outsider." "That's not the case," Xian Yuanyao said calmly, "but compared to what I said, you do seem to be an outsider." Xiejin was dissatisfied. "Yao Yao. I'll tell you when I get back," Xian Yuanyao said calmly. "There are many people coming and going in the palace, you should pay attention to your image. I am now a first-rank general, don't get so close to me, it's not good if someone sees you." Yao Yao's words are chilling. "Chilling?" asked Xian Yuanyao said coldly. "Loving couples know that they should be careful in public. We are also a loving couple, husband and wife." Rong Yu frowned and stared at the two outstanding figures. It was hard to imagine that Xiejin was so virtuous in front of Xian Yuanyao. He was like this in broad daylight, and he was afraid that he would be even more unbearable in private. Rong Yu frowned again and again, too lazy to pay attention to their affairs, and walked back to Dajhan Palace. When Rong Yu returned to Dajhan Palace, Hao and Zhaner had finished their morning literature class. Nan 11 ordered the palace servants to prepare their favorite snacks for the two children, and she sat aside and quietly checked Hao's morning homework. Raising his hand to stop the palace servants from greeting, Rong Yu stood alone at the palace gate, quietly watching the warm and quiet scene in Dajhan Palace. Xian Yuanyao was right. He had indeed changed a lot over the years and became more human. When Rong Yu recalled his youth now, he always felt that it was very far away. And he never wanted to go back to the past, which would make him live a life worse than death. Rong Yu walked into the palace in silence, and a warm breath came to his face. He raised his hand to take off his cloak and gave it to Yin Yu. The two children who were replenishing food saw their father coming back, and they stood up and walked over obediently. Zhan imitated his brother Hao and greeted his father in a formal manner. A white shadow flashed in front of him, and the ferret jumped neatly onto Hao's small shoulder, sat with its tail curled up, and looked at Rong Yu warily. "You're back." Nan 11 turned around and smiled at him. "Have you finished handling government affairs?" "Not yet." Rong Yu signaled Hao and Zhaner not to be polite. "Eat less snacks, we'll have dinner later." The two children nodded obediently. Rong Yu turned around and walked to Nan 11 and sat down, naturally holding her waist. 11 Nan 11 kissed his face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Rong Yu's lips curled up, his voice was very soft. "I just feel that I'm very lucky enough to be blessed by God, only then can we have the happiness we have now." Nan 11 smiled. "We are all very lucky. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered." Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 854. They had already had a few days off during the Chinese New Year. When Xian Yuanyao and Xiejin returned from South Vietnam, the ministers had just resumed their morning court. Due to the many matters after the war in South Vietnam, the court was very busy after the New Year. Not only Nan 11 and Rong Yu were busy, but also the Xie family's father and son and other important officials in the court, as well as Xian Yuanyao and all the generals under his command were also extremely busy. After the military merit awards were distributed, Xian Yuanyao discussed with the generals and arranged the holidays of the soldiers in an orderly manner. If the Ministry of Household Affairs wants to allocate money, it needs the approval of Xiejin, the minister in charge of the family. Although it was a reward personally given by Her Majesty the Queen and the Prince Regent, due to the large amount of money involved, no one could be neglected. Xiejin had to personally review and approve every payment, plus some from the Ministry of Punishments. Things also required Xiejin's decision-making, so Xiejin was very busy throughout the second half of the first month and the first half of February. He left early and came back late for the whole month, and spent most of his time in the household department. The Ministry of Industry is also busy repairing the new general's mansion and expanding the military camp to recruit young troops. There were many affairs, large and small, in the military camp, so the Ministry of War naturally became busy. South Vietnam has just fallen, and its territory has been divided into the Tanglan territory. A large number of officials need to be appointed and mobilized. Which ministers in the court are suitable for external transfer, which ministers are capable of serving as the parent officials of a state, which young upstarts are suitable for going out to experience. The staff is also busy day and night. While discussing the matter, one after another was presented to the imperial court, waiting for the approval of Her Majesty the Queen and the Prince Regent. In short, it was very busy. The only one among the 6 departments that is relatively free is probably the Ministry of Rights. However, it is obviously impossible for the Ministry of Rights to take a break. In the second half of February, many things have been on track, and the government has gradually stabilized. Whether it is in the military camp or in the court, the major decision-making matters have basically been decided. The next step is to execute it step by step. Her Majesty the Queen issued a decree and ordered the Ministry of Rights to prepare the notice and send it to various countries, inviting kings from various countries to visit Tanglan and celebrate the expansion of Tanglan territory. This is a special invitation. It is definitely not a good faith decision to invite the kings to a banquet after Dongling has just destroyed South Vietnam. And precisely because of the special situation, the Ministry of Etiquette needs to put more thought into hosting the state banquet to entertain kings and dignitaries from various countries. The invitation date is set in August, which gives each country enough time to prepare, and the schedule is not urgent. There is even enough time to think, hesitate, and struggle. Spring came in March, and Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao, who had finally sorted out all the major and minor matters, embarked on their journey back to Huainan. The Lord said he wanted us to rest, but in fact we have almost been working like cows and horses in the past 2 months. Xiejin looked at the vast sky, the blue sky, the white clouds, the warm spring season, and even the air was full of flowers. Inhaling the sweet smell, but Her Majesty the Queen and the Lord themselves are too busy to touch the ground. As a loyal minister, it seems that I shouldn't complain. Loyal? Xian Yuanyao glanced at him. Just talking about you, it has nothing to do with being loyal. How could Yao Yao say that? Xiejin raised his eyebrows and firmly denied that he was unfaithful. Although I complained a few words, I was not careless at all when I did things, was I not? Xian Yuanyao said, you should give it a try. I don't dare to try. 2 horses walk side by side. Xiejin looked at the endless wilderness in the countryside. I still want to grow old together with Yao Yao. Xian Yuanyao was used to talking about love, and now he calmly issued a challenge. The road in front of us is flat and the terrain is wide. Shall we compete? Xiejin raised his eyebrows slightly. The winner can do whatever he wants tonight. Xian Yuanyao sneered, I'll talk about it after we win. As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked his riding whip, and the 2 horses galloped away in an instant, leaving only dust flying in the sky. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 855. The prince is 4 years old. Nan 11 finally decided to choose a companion for him. In addition to Xian Yuanzhan who studied with him before and Sen An who entered the palace later, The regent ordered the court officials to report their children of the right age. They can be about the same age as the prince, but not too different. The standard is that they can communicate normally. However, although the prince's companion is a coveted position, it is by no means so competent. Reporting the list does not mean that you can be selected. Although the selection of companions is different from the selection of talents, the process of passing 5 levels and killing 6 generals is almost the same, so being too young will definitely not be an advantage. For example, if you are 2 or 3 years old, you are asked to recite a 3-character classic on the spot. If you can recite it, you will stay, and if you can't recite it, you will be eliminated. Normal children start to learn at the age of 3. For those who are more strict, they have laid a good foundation when they are over 4 or 5 years old. However, some 2 or 3-year-old children are not very clear in their articulation. How can they be compared? Unless they are gifted. The younger they are, the more obvious the gap between those who are 1 or 2 years older. Those who are too old are not good either, because they have no common language with the prince and cannot communicate. However, those who are about the same age as the prince, such as 4 or 5 years old, may not necessarily be in his favor. Because the prince is too smart, 3 points smarter than the average smart child. Even if the official's child is not as smart as the prince, at least he can't be too stupid. If there is a big difference in knowledge, how can the little prince be interested in him? Although this child is only 4 years old, his vision is extremely high. He has very strict requirements for reading companions. Those who can catch his eye must have something special. In short, the selection of reading companions is like an emperor's selection of talents. There are a total of 28 children reported by the officials. In the first round of checking the physical condition of each child, 4 people were screened out because they were too weak and often took medicine for colds. I am afraid that they will not have enough energy and physical strength to accompany the prince to study and practice martial arts in the future. In the second round of reciting articles, 12 people were directly eliminated, leaving 12 people. The third round of the test was about reading and writing. The students read articles that the prince had learned to see how many words they could recognize, and wrote words that they had learned to see their handwriting and the degree of their knowledge. Naturally, another 8 people were eliminated in this round. The remaining 4 children were arranged to live in the palace that night, in the side hall of the Dajhan Palace, which was only separated from the upper study room of the Taifa by a wall. Cheng Xiao, the eldest grandson of Cheng, the Minister of War, was 6 years old. Su Han, the second grandson of Wen Yuan Pavilion University scholar, was 5 years old. Zhang Ye, the youngest son of Zhang, the imperial censor, was 5 years old. Fu Danqing, the legitimate son of the cabinet scholar, was 4 years old. Her Majesty arranged for Nanny Wen and Nanny An to take care of their meals and washing in the evening, told them the rules of the palace, and left the side hall after the 4 children had reached bedtime. Living together with 4 children was a novel experience for them. There was a lamp left in the hall, and the light was dim, but it did not prevent them from seeing each other clearly because the beds were not far apart. I'm Su Han, and my grandfather is a scholar of Wen Yuan Pavilion. The child with a delicate face sat up from the bed and looked at the other 3, is your grandfather also in such a high position? The 3 children were silent for a while, and one of them sat up, my name is Cheng Xiao, have we been left behind? Su Han frowned, I'm asking you a question, why are you answering irrelevant questions? We should be left behind. Another child lay flat on the bed, staring at the curtains in the palace, as if studying the differences with the curtains at home, but we haven't seen the prince yet. If the prince doesn't like us, we may not be able to stay. Paused, by the way, my name is Fu Danqing, and my father is NEI cabinet reader, although I don't know if this official position is high or not, but in my heart, my father is the most powerful person. Cabinet reader, Su Han showed contempt, it doesn't sound like a high-ranking official. My grandfather is a university scholar dash. What does your father do? Suhan said proudly, father is studying at home, and he will also take the exam to become a high-ranking official in the future. Cheng Xiao said, but Fu Danking's father has become a high-ranking official, which means that his father is more powerful than your father. Suhan's face flushed instantly, my grandfather is powerful. Cheng Xiao ignored him and turned to look at another child who was still lying in bed. Zhang Ye, your father is the censor, right? Who is more powerful, the censor or the university scholar? Zhang Ye didn't speak. Zhang Ye, are you annoying when you go to bed? Zhang Ye turned his head and glared at him. No one's official is as powerful as Her Majesty the Queen and the Regent. You are so powerful at home, but you still have to be obedient in front of His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 856. As soon as the sentence came out, the other three people were silent instantly. The oldest among them was only 6 years old, and the youngest was 4 years old. They were too young to have a basic understanding of the level of official positions, and most of them were told by their elders at home. They did not know the specific official titles, powers, and jurisdiction of the positions. Moreover, the children were young, and even if they were eloquent and good at rebutting, they could not argue with others in an unknown field. Therefore, although they felt that Zhang Ye's words were inappropriate, they could not argue with reason. If they were adults, they would at least be able to distinguish between the superiority and inferiority of the monarch and loyalty to the monarch, but the children did not have a deep understanding for the time being. After a long silence, Cheng Xiao spoke again, the emperor is the one who governs the country. His Royal Highness the Crown Prince will also govern the country when he grows up. We are loyal to His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. Zhang Ye asked, what is loyalty? Cheng Xiao frowned and thought for a moment. Loyalty is, that is, listen to the Crown Prince. Loyalty means studying martial arts well, making yourself very powerful, and helping the Crown Prince when you grow up. Fu Danking took over the conversation. This is what my father said. Cheng Xiao nodded, yes, that's what I mean. Outside the side window, Rong Yu held Hauer and listened quietly to the childish arguments of the 4 children in the hall. His eyes fell on Hauer's face. What do you think? Hauer did not answer immediately, but asked, Father, how many companions do you need? Not too many, Rong Yu said, originally 4 were enough, but I want to train more outstanding children for you. The number does not need to be too fixed, but the best must be selected. Hauer nodded, then except Suhan, the other 3 will stay. Rong Yu hugged him and turned back to the Dajhan Palace. Why? Suhan is very competitive in his words. When he mentioned his father, the most direct sentence was take the exam to become a high official, which proves that he is very utilitarian. It must be the family tradition of the Su family that makes the children behave like this. Utilitarianism is not a fatal flaw, but if such a person really enters the official career in the future, he will definitely put personal interests above everything else, abuse power for personal gain, and even use power to oppress others. Such people cannot be used. Rong Yu nodded, where is Zhang Ye? Zhang Ye has a bad temper and is a bit hot-tempered. Hauer frowned slightly, although my family should have explained before I came to the palace that what Cheng Xiao and Fu Danking said might not necessarily be my own thoughts, but Zhang Ye was disrespectful and didn't know how to restrain his temper after entering the palace. It can be seen that he is also a little bully at home. Rong Yu smiled faintly, so you still keep him. He is smarter than Fu Danking and Cheng Xiao, and he is also very courageous. Want to stay and hone yourself? Hauer said, you can try. Rong Yu said gently, what if you are wrong? The Grand Tutor said that you can tell a child's future from his childhood. You can tell the family style from a child, and the family style can affect a person's life. Hauer answered his father's question very clearly. Father also said that it is difficult to change one's nature. Hauer thinks that what father said and what the Tafo said makes sense. Rong Yu nodded slowly. Then what do you think of Genre? Genre is very good, and the Tafo is very strict with him. Hauer thought about it and answered calmly, he doesn't slack off in class, he is smart, and he can endure hardships in martial arts training. There is nothing unsatisfactory at present. Xianyuan Zhan is 2 months younger than Hauer. The two are now of the same age. They are also the earliest companions to study together. They are truly nominal companions. Although they are young, they have the deepest qualifications. When they grow up, Xianyuan Zhan will be an absolute veteran among all companions. Rong Yu thought of what Xianyuan Yao said before, and said calmly, the king of Huainan has a young son. You should call him uncle, or uncle. He will enter the palace soon, and you have to take care of him. Hauer was confused. Take care of him. May I ask how old this uncle is? He is a few months older than Genre. Rong Yu said, according to your mother's relationship, you should call him uncle, but you have the surname of Xianyuan royal family. Xianyuan Hui is also royal family, you two are from the same clan, so according to royal family rules, you should call him uncle. Hauer said, then call him uncle. Although this uncle sounds like a younger brother, the seniority cannot be messed up, and he should be called what he should be called. But Hauer is still young, and he would ask questions whenever he has doubts in his heart. The king of Huainan is the father of Uncle Yao, why did he have another son after so long? This question. Rong Yu was silent for a moment. Is it strange to have 2 sons? It's not strange to have 2 sons. Hauer shook his head, but Uncle Yao and the younger uncle are too different in age. If Uncle Yao has a child, it's almost the same now that he's 2 years old. It's precisely because he has no children that the king of Huainan wants to have another one. Hauer was surprised. Uncle Yao has no children now, can't he get married and have children in the future? No. Why? He already has someone he likes. Rong Yu walked into the Dajhan palace, and his voice was light, that's your Uncle Jin. Hauer opened his mouth wide, rarely showing this stunned expression, can 2 men get married? Relatively rare. Rong Yu said, it may suffer some criticism, and it is difficult for the secular world to accept it, and the tolerance is small, but if the two have strong willpower and can withstand strange eyes and criticism, it is not impossible. Hauer said, oh, indicating that he didn't quite understand, but he could probably understand what his father meant. No wonder Uncle Jin and Uncle Yao always come to the Dajhan palace together, and they look so intimate, even sleeping in the same bed. Only then did Hauer's little head understand that they were also in a husband and wife relationship. After entering the bedroom, Rong Yu put Hauer down, and the little prince turned around to pay his respects to his mother, and walked to Nan 11's side, looking at his brother sitting on Nan 11's lap, and reached out to touch his head. Genre. Little Genre smiled at his brother and stretched out his hand for him to hold him. Although Hauer had exercised, he was still a little young, and it was still a bit difficult to hold his brother. Genre lay on him like an octopus. Nan 11 laughed at this, and Rong Yu's mouth corners also hooked, and he ordered to the left and right, take the 2 princes to wash and go to bed. The palace servant took the order, took little Genre from Hauer's arms, and walked towards the side hall holding Hauer's hand. Nan 11 looked at Rong Yu, how is it going? Hauer has chosen 3. Rong Yu sat down, took the tea that Nan 11 handed him and took a sip, add Xianyuan Zhan, Xianyuan Hui, Sen En, Rong Chen, Genre can barely be counted as one, so there are 8 children, which is enough for the time being. Nan 11 nodded, although Genre is still young, the brothers have a deep relationship. Let Hauer, the elder brother, take care of him. In 2 years, send Jiajia's child here, and Chu Nanyi's daughter. After a slight pause, Nan 11 smiled and said, Sons have flourished in the past 2 years, but daughters have become scarce. If Kingling's daughter is really after entering the palace, do you think the boys will bully her or treat her as a treasure? Wrong, you said in a gentle voice. Hauer and his group of children are reliable and will not do anything to bully others. Other emperors rely on the 3 palaces and 6 courtyards to stabilize the court, and Hauer will have these companions in the future. Nan 11 leaned on the brocade couch, her voice was a little soft. It is a man's job to defend the country. Only when you are strong can you control your emotions, otherwise you will not be able to avoid being constrained and facing a situation where you can't help yourself. The king of a country has times when he can't help himself, and since ancient times, it is the women trapped in the deep palace who have been more helpless. Daughters are so delicate. They obey their fathers and brothers at home and obey the king in the palace. If they are willing to enter the palace, it's fine. They always seek wealth and glory. Even if they fail in the end, they can't blame others. The innocent are always those women who don't want to enter the palace but can't resist their fate. Rong Yu was silent for a moment, and said, if all the emperors of the past dynasties could have 11 ER's broad mind and temperament, there would be fewer incompetent emperors, and the civil strife caused by the monopoly of power by foreign relatives would be curbed, and the people of the world would be blessed. Nan 11 looked at him silently. You just like to flatter me. Your Majesty is very perceptive. Rong Yu laughed and stretched out his hand to hold her in his arms. What I said is absolutely the truth from the bottom of my heart. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 857. Early the next morning, the prince had to go to the study room for class, and ordered 4 candidates to be taken to the study room. This is the final round. The 4 of them greeted each other respectfully. The etiquette was standard, but they were all children after all. Xian Yuanqi was not strict with them. He quickly asked them to sit down on their seats and prepared pens, ink, paper, and inkstones for all 4 of them. In addition to Hauer, there are also Sen En and Zhaner in the upper study room, plus 4 companion candidates, a total of 7 children. Hauer was sitting in the back row, and when he raised his eyes, he could see the backs of the 4 candidate readers. One morning was enough for Xian Yuanqi to figure out the nature of the 4 children, from the etiquette when they first met, the children's self-cultivation, the magnanimity shown when speaking, and their performance in class. Although Hauer is young, he still knows how to distinguish many things. His views are roughly the same as Xian Yuanqi's, so in the end it is no surprise that only one Suhan was eliminated from the 4 children, leaving 3. When the adults from each family came to pick up the children at noon, Xian Yuanqi said something. Master Su's grandson has some shortcomings. He needs to give more advice after returning home. While the children should focus on academics, they should also cultivate a humble and gentle character. Otherwise I'm afraid you will develop bad habits. The words he said without hesitation only made Mr. Su break into a cold sweat. Even though Xian Yuanqi, a young junior, is not as good as him, a bachelor of Wenyuan Pavilion, in terms of qualifications and power, Mr. Su will never dare to underestimate Xian Yuanqi. Firstly, his father is Prince Jing, and secondly, they are husband and wife. The 2 of them are quite favored by Her Majesty the Queen and the Prince Regent. The fact that they received the post of Prince Tutor at such a young age is enough to prove how much Their Majesty and the Prince Regent value him. He said that Suhan had some shortcomings. This was obviously a denial, but it was just a mild statement. However, people who serve as officials in the court have always been more and more frightened rather than scary. They are more afraid of those who are calm or have a gentle smile, because you will never know what they are thinking in their hearts. Mr. Su said with a very sincere attitude, in order to cope with the scientific examination next year, Kwanzaa spent almost all his energy on studying. This little grandson is usually taken care of by his mother a lot. He is indeed a little spoiled. The officer will be disciplined strictly when he returns. So Mr. Su led Suhan out of the palace first. The other three officials received the reply, the prince is still growing and must ensure adequate sleep, so the class time is set at Chen time every day. You can arrange for a reliable person in the family to send the child over. There is no need to come too early. The three adults nodded, thank you, Master Qi. Xian Yuan prayed, we will work hard for a few days first. After a while, the children will become familiar with the prince. Your Majesty will arrange for them to live in the palace. This will save time on the road entering and leaving the palace. The children can also sleep a little more every day. The master of the Fu family said, thank you for your consideration, Teifu. It is their honor to be able to accompany His Highness the Crown Prince in reading. I will never dare to say that it is hard work. The master of the Zhang family said, this boy of mine has a tough skin and a bad temper. If he makes a mistake in the future, please give him a punishment, but he must be disciplined strictly. The adults of the Cheng family agreed. Xian Yuan Qi was a graceful young master most of the time. After becoming the prince's tutor, he became more refined and gentle. Don't worry, my lords. After entering the palace as the prince's companion, you will have to be bound by the palace rules and learn the rules of respecting teachers and respecting morality. I, the Grand Tutor, must treat everyone equally and impartially. As he spoke, he looked at the three children with a smile, if anyone dares to disobey discipline, my teacher's ruler is always ready for you. Zhang Ye, Fu Danqing and Cheng Xiao looked at each other silently, with a solemn look on their young and green faces. The matter of choosing the companions was decided, and the next day the companions went to the palace to study with the prince step by step. This is the beginning of the prince's era. After Zhana's second birthday, he followed the prince and his brother into the study room. Although he still couldn't understand the lessons taught by the prince, he was quite well behaved when he sat next to the prince. When the prince taught, he would leave a separate piece of homework for him. He asked him to learn to write. Zhaner can't write yet, and his handwriting is crooked, like ghost drawings, but he still has something to do, and he won't be so bored that he looks around or wants to talk but doesn't dare. Xian Yuanyao and Xiejin set out for Huainan in March. It was already May when they arrived in Huainan. They spent 2 months traveling around the mountains and rivers. Hui'er was almost 3 years old when they arrived in Huainan. The baby, who was still an infant when we last met, is now walking very steadily, and can even practice a few moves in a decent manner, stretch his arms and kick his calves, and looks particularly energetic. Xian Yuanyao was really shocked. I said goodbye to Huainan last time. I haven't been home for so long. Is he too unfilial? He actually came back after more than 2 years away from home. The most important thing is that he himself didn't seem to feel that time passed so fast. People say that you forget your mother when you marry a daughter-in-law, and it's true, Princess Huainan said in a calm voice. Thankfully we have given birth to an extra Hui'er, otherwise we will be old and homeless in the future. Xian Yuanyao suddenly felt guilty. Xian Yuanxie, the daughter-in-law of the Huainan palace, stood aside with lowered eyebrows and lowered her eyes. She said in a humble tone, this is my fault. Just ask my mother-in-law to punish me. Cough 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 cough. King Huainan, who was sitting nearby drinking tea, couldn't hold it back. He spit out a mouthful of tea, which made his old face turn red and he lost all his majesty. Cough cough cough. The atmosphere became stagnant for a moment, as if even the air had stopped flowing. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 858. Princess Huainan and Xian Yuanyao, mother and son, turned to look at Xiejin at the same time, with strange and dull eyes, as if they had seen a ghost in broad daylight. Xiejin looked at Xian Yuanyao innocently, husband, what's wrong? That look seemed to say, didn't you keep emphasizing on the road that I must abide by my duties as a little wife? Xian Yuanyao's face was expressionless. I asked you to keep your duty, and I didn't ask you to be so shameless. Xiejin expressed his injustice. Doesn't the young wife have to have a sweet mouth and be able to talk? Where did he go wrong? Princess Huainan turned to look at her prince. The always cold and majestic King Huainan's mouth twitched sharply twice, his face turned slightly blue, and he was unusually rude. However, King Huainan was King Huainan after all, and his loss of state only lasted a moment. He quickly regained his composure, slowly raised his hand to wipe away the tea from the corner of his mouth, and regained his composure. How long do you two plan to stay when you come back this time? 2 months. Xian Yuanyao came back to his senses and replied, the Lord has given us a long vacation. This time I can stay and accompany my father, queen, mother, and concubine. I don't need your company, King Huainan said calmly. Stay for half a month and leave Huainan immediately after half a month. Xian Yuanyao was stunned. Why? Why? Still need to ask why? King Huainan gave them a cold look. I am upset when I see you. Xian Yuanyao. Xiejin. Your Majesty, don't be like this. The princess spoke with a helpless smile on her lips. My son finally came back, why are you so anxious to drive him away? Although these two children are a bit unreliable, they are still a couple after all. Son, don't break their hearts. Xian Yuanyao was about to nod when he was suddenly surprised. A son and a half. Yes, you are our biological son, and your daughter-in-law is half a son. Doesn't it add up to 1.5? Princess Huainan sighed. Fortunately, your father and I had the foresight, otherwise we would not even have grandchildren in our lives. Not on. Speaking of this, she glanced at Xiejin faintly. It's a pity that she can't have children. I can't even give her a gift as a mother-in-law. Xiejin hurriedly said, Junior doesn't mind. Do you want the ancestral jade bracelet? Princess Yuyo said. This princess was given as a gift by the queen mother when she married the prince. Xiejin choked, and then coughed lightly. A gentleman will not take away people's love, and the younger generation will be ashamed of it. The princess sneered. Father, mother, and concubine. Xian Yuanyao changed the subject and returned to business. This time my son comes back, there is something else that requires the father's consent. What's the matter? I want to take my younger brother to the imperial capital and let him study with the prince. Xian Yuanyao said, the Lord has agreed to this. Let Huai'er go to the imperial capital. The princess frowned. Why? The king of Huainan understood what Xian Yuanyao meant. He was silent for a moment and said calmly, that's okay. South Vietnam has just been destroyed, and Huainan's military strength needs to be greatly adjusted. There are still many things to be arranged in the future. In a few days, my family and 3 will go to Beijing. Let's discuss the handover of military power with the regent, and let you, mother and son, stay in the imperial capital to accompany Her Majesty the Queen, so that I don't have any worries and can concentrate on military affairs. The princess said, a family of 3. Xian Yuanyao was also surprised, a family of 3. King Huainan frowned and looked at him, otherwise, we will still be a family of 5. Xian Yuanyao. Well, he has been excluded from the family of 3. Xian Yuanyao and Xiejin stayed in Huainan for 2 months. In addition to the fact that the father and son had many military matters to discuss, it was also because the weather was too hot and it was not comfortable to travel. Moreover, the Lord was on a long vacation, so they were not in a hurry to go back for the time being. So Xian Yuanyao and Xiejin stayed in Huainan for 2 months in such a grand manner. Even though the king of Huainan frequently frowned because of Xiejin's shamelessness, he just turned a blind eye and was too lazy to find trouble for himself. Before the hot summer was over, King Huainan ordered his people to pack their luggage and select dozens of elites, preparing to take his princess and young son to the imperial capital. The weather is hot, and it will not be very comfortable for my mother and my brother to be trapped in the carriage all the way. Xian Yuanyao said, Father, you might as well wait a little longer. We can't wait any longer, King Huainan said in a calm voice. kings from all over the world will arrive in Dongling one after another in August. If I arrive late, I'm afraid I won't be able to catch up with the excitement. After a pause, as for your mother-in-law and Hui'er, I will try my best to take good care of them. I will rush in the morning and evening and rest when it is too hot at noon. He, the prince in charge of the military, was of pure Aventuran blood. When kings from all over the world gathered together, he had to rush back to support the Aventuran army. My father and my concubine will leave first, and Hui'er will follow me, Xianyuanyao suggested. My concubine can also ride a horse, so it won't be too uncomfortable to ride on a horse. Hui'er will be left with me and a jinn. We will take good care of him. The mother-in-law doesn't have to worry about her brother along the way. Princess Huainan was a little uneasy. Hui'er is still young. He will be 3 years old in a few days, Xianyuanyao said. I don't need to feed him. Is the mother worried that I will abuse him? Princess Huainan glared at him. You kid, how can you talk? No matter how they talked, they finally listened to Xianyuanyao's suggestion. The king of Huainan and the princess rode ahead with their elite troops. Xianyuanyao and Xiejin still had the attitude of playing while walking, a few steps behind the king of Huainan and his wife, and took Hui'er to eat. Drink well and play well. Are Hui'er happy? Xiejin looked down at the little guy in his arms, with a slight smile on his face. Happy. Brother Yao, how are you? Okay. Is Brother Jin good? Okay. Do you like Brother Yao and Brother Jin? Yes. Xianyuanyao listened to their questions and answers with a strange expression. Ah Jin, you look like a matchmaker who abducts ignorant children. Matchmaker? Xiejin turned to look at him. Is there a matchmaker as young and handsome as me, as smart as me, in a high position and with deep loyalty? Probably not before, Xianyuanyao said in a flat tone. Won't there be one after you changed your career? Xiejin sighed. If I changed my career to become a matchmaker, the foundation of Dongling country would be shaken. Xianyuanyao was about to ask why, but suddenly realized what he meant and was speechless for a moment. The crown prince of Dongling is only 4 years old, and Zhaner from Xianyuanqi's family is about the same age as the crown prince. There is also the second prince Rongzhan. With the favor Xiejin enjoys in the court, the crown prince also trusts him, and he has always been willing to work harder for the competent, so he wants to abduct the crown prince, Zhaner and Rongzhan together. This possibility is not impossible. If such a thing really happened, even if Her Majesty the Queen and the Regent cut Xiejin into pieces, and Prince Jing's mansion sent troops to surround the Xie family, it is afraid that it will not be possible to avoid chaos in the country for a while. Xianyuanyao was silent for a moment. So this is why the superiors must be cautious in employing people. If they employ people with bad conduct, the consequences will be really unimaginable. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 859. On August 16, a state banquet was held in Dongling to entertain kings and dignitaries from various countries. A prince, Duanmuyu, came from northern Xinjiang. He was already a frequent visitor to Dongling. Although the last time he came here was not pleasant and even a little scary, this time Dongling took the initiative to invite kings and nobles from various countries to visit Dongling. He was not worried. Another accident occurred, and this time there were 5,000 guards escorting the prince. In fact, it was not Duanmuyu who wanted to come, but the emperor's health had become weaker and weaker in recent years, and he could not bear the hard work of traveling, so he, the prince, could only be sent as an envoy on the emperor's behalf. Duanmuyu did have hesitation, struggle, and hesitation before coming to Dongling. Ministers from various factions in the court expressed their opinions. Some people thought that Dongling was now a dragon's pond and a tiger's den, and the prince should not take risks. Others thought that if the prince did not go, it would give people a sense of fear. The impression of Dongling. Northern Xinjiang was once the most powerful cavalry country among the 9 countries. If it fell to the point where it did not dare to even be invited by the king of other countries, it would only make people laugh. So after months of deliberations, discussions, and debates in court, Duan Muyu finally set foot on this land that he didn't like very much. This was originally expected by Rong Yu. Not only Duan Muyu, but also Ziki thought that Dongling's invitation was a hungmen banquet. The battle between Lin Ao, the regent of Ziki, and the young emperor was ultimately defeated. The Lin family was executed by the entire clan. Xian Yuanyao was still alive when this happened at the end of last year. During the conquest of South Vietnam, all countries were paying attention to the war in South Vietnam, so the cessation of the civil strife in Ziki seemed a bit insignificant. After the new year, the situation in the Western Qi dynasty has just stabilized, but it is undeniable that although the little emperor finally won this internal fight and successfully took control of the real power, his own injuries were also extremely serious. The generals in charge of the military in the DPRK were previously killed by Lin Ao's uncle and nephew suppressed him severely. After the little emperor came to power, there were not many people he could use. He still needed enough time to stabilize his throne and cultivate his cronies. Therefore, he actually thought about Dongling's invitation for a long time, and finally decided to give in. He directly sent an eloquent censor from the court with several ministers, and clearly informed Her Majesty the Queen Dongling and the regent. There have been many incidents in Ziki recently, and the emperor really can't leave. I ask Your Majesty and the regent to forgive me. Naturally, Nan 11 and Rong Yu wouldn't mind this little thing. The one who came from the great Zhou dynasty was Rong Chuxiu. In order to express his respect for the emperor's uncle and the great Zhou dynasty's congratulations on Dongling's destruction of South Vietnam, Rong Chuxiu not only came to congratulate him in person, but also brought very grand congratulatory gifts, each of which was heavy. Although boxes and long gift lists are common to all countries, taking out so many lavishly is enough to cause heartache for any country. So is Shu. The newly appointed regent princess and the prince-in-law came in person, followed by a team carrying generous gifts. At first glance, they thought it was Shili Hongchuang, and they only brought the treasury of Shu. Originally, I wanted to present a few beautiful young men to Her Majesty the Queen. Ye Qingqing's attitude was very sincere, but my prince-in-law was timid and was afraid that I would be splashed with blood and never be able to return to Shu, so I had to give up and hope that Her Majesty the Queen would forgive me. The ministers of Dongling stared at this elegant woman with open mouths, secretly thinking that she is really brave. In front of the regent of Dongling, she bluntly offered a beautiful boy to Her Majesty the Queen. The blood splattered on the spot was probably minor. Doesn't she know how South Vietnam was destroyed? Yunding stood aside with a helpless smile on his face. He also felt that Ye Qingcheng was brave enough to dare to provoke the tiger. Princess Qingcheng is so kind and I accept it with my heart. Nan 11 smiled gently, thank you so much to the Kingdom of Shu for sending such a grand congratulatory gift. Please take a seat, both of you. Rong Yu said nothing, his eyes were cold and threatening, and he was unparalleled in dignity. Ye Qingcheng bowed slightly, the territory of the world is Dongling's largest, and the military strength of the world is Dongling's strongest. From now on, the Shu kingdom is willing to respect Dongling and pay tribute every year to show its sincerity. I only hope that the world will be stable and there will be no more wars. As soon as these words came out, the hall suddenly became quiet. Prince Duanwu of northern Xinjiang and the envoys of Western Qi dynasty all had stiff expressions on their faces, and were caught off guard by the sudden singing of the song by the Shu kingdom. Is Dongling the largest territory in the world? Is Dongling the strongest military force in the world? Although these are all facts at the moment, why should other countries respect Tanglin from now on? Shu could just do it quietly on its own accord, So why should it express its position in public? What do you want to do? Are the female streamers too cowardly, or do they want to force other countries to follow suit? Duan Muyu clenched his wine glass tightly, wishing he could kill Yeching Cheng on the spot to vent his anger. The eldest princess of Shu has good intentions. Her Majesty, the Queen of Dongling, also really likes to have good relations with other countries, so that the world can be stable and the people can live and work in peace and contentment. A leisurely and pleasant voice sounded during the dinner. The only question is whether the world can be stable, or whether it can be completely stopped still depends on the attitude of each country. If someone always makes provocations regardless of life and death, then isn't it like South Vietnam's own destruction? After the words fell, the ministers of Dongling nodded one after another. Yes, Dongling has always been a country seeking stability and will never take the initiative to start a war. However, there are always some people who think that Dongling is easy to bully and make stupid provocations time and time again. Why don't you give them some color to show that Dongling's cavalry army is vegetarian? The destruction of South Vietnam is a warning to other countries. I hope that everyone present should restrain their ambitions. Of course, if you can sincerely make good friends with Dongling like the eldest princess of Shu, it will definitely be a pleasure. Things. This is indeed a hungman banquet. Duan Muyu, the prince of northern Xinjiang, who was holding a wine cup, thought so, and the envoy of Ziki also thought the same. Using the attitude of Shu to force other countries to surrender, willingly pay tribute to show sincerity, and respect Dongling as the master from now on, is this considered greedy and ambitious? In fact, what the princess of Shu said is also my idea. Rong Chuxiu, the emperor of the Great Zhou sitting in the first seat on the left, spoke loudly. This time, the Great Zhou presented a gift, firstly to celebrate Dongling's great victory in the battle with Nanyu, and secondly to show my attitude. From now on, Dongling will be respected, only for the stability of the world and no more wars in the world. The envoys of the Great Zhou nodded one after another. With Her Majesty the Queen and the Regent, Dongling will surely prosper, and the country will last forever. The Great Zhou and Dongling were originally a family, and one family naturally supported one family. In order to ensure the stability of the territory of the Great Zhou and the well-being and prosperity of the people, it is necessary to hold on to the thigh of the regent. Duan Muyu suddenly realized that since the destruction of Nanyu, the northern frontier has been isolated and helpless. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 860. The husband of Princess Yeching Cheng of Shu is Yun Ting, but Yun Ting is Rong Yu's subordinate. Although not many people know this fact, and since Yeching Cheng and Yun Ting returned to Shu to start revenge, Rong Yu rarely interfered in Shu's affairs, and even Yun Ting's private affairs, as if he had given him complete freedom. But Shu's current attitude is very clear, and Yun Ting and Yeching Cheng's attitudes are also very clear. Everything is respected by Dongling. And Dezhou is the country of Regent Rong Yu, and even the current emperor of Dezhou is supported by Rong Yu. At least it can be ensured that Dezhou will be obedient within 10 or 8 years. Rong Chuxiu's attitude towards this uncle is nothing but awe, and it should not change much in a short time. In this way, after the fall of Nanyu, Beijiang has completely lost the country to form an alliance with. Shu will not form an alliance with him, Dazhu will not form an alliance with him, but is hostile to Beijiang, and Ziki. Ziki is not only busy with its own affairs, but also has nothing to do with Beijiang. There is a Yan kingdom between the two countries. It is not impossible to form an alliance, but at the same time, Beijiang is connected to Dazhu in the south and Dongling in the east. Once there is any disturbance between Beijiang and Ziki, Dazhu and Dongling can join forces to deal with Beijiang, and Shu, located in the south of Dazhu, can send troops to hold Ziki back at the same time. In short, now the two countries are surrounded and trapped by 3 countries. Beijiang is in a dilemma, and Ziki also has no room to struggle. Duan silently analyzed the situation of the countries in the world in his mind, and finally learned that the current situation of Beijiang and Ziki is not very good. In the short term, there seems to be no other way except to obey. I am deeply gratified that distinguished guests from all over the world have come from afar. Nan 11 sat in the main seat, raised her teacup and gestured from a distance, I offer you a cup. The dignitaries and envoys from all countries hurriedly raised their wine cups. Even if someone saw that Nan 11 was using tea instead of wine, they did not dare to raise any opinions. Her Majesty the Queen of Dongling is the most noble woman in the world today. Next to her sits the most powerful man in the world today. All the imperfections in the details can be ignored. This palace banquet can be called the Hungmen banquet, but probably only Duan Muyu and the envoys of Ziki felt that way. For the Emperor of the Great Zhou and the couple of the Kingdom of Shu, it was just a vacation to visit Her Majesty the Queen and the Regent, reminisce about the past, and cultivate feelings. And to show loyalty, hoping that in the next few years, all countries can be more peaceful, and the world can be quieter, and don't make things happen every now and then to disturb their peace. This is August of the 5th year of Ronghua. After this palace banquet, every year on the birthday of Her Majesty the Queen, Great Zhou and Shu would send envoys to send grand gifts to show respect. The young king of Ziki, who had just stabilized the throne, finally chose to befriend Dongling. Starting in the winter of the 6th year of Ronghua, he sent generous gifts every year to show respect. All the major countries had the same attitude, not to mention Yan and Qing, who were trying to survive in the cracks. However, Her Majesty the Queen was not a person who liked to bully others. She was willing to give protection to weak countries. Not only did she not accept tribute from Qing and Yan, but she gave the two countries some rewards, including you. So the three small countries became vassal states attached to Dongling, and completely got rid of the threats of Beijiang and Ziki. Another year passed, and the old emperor of Beijiang died. Duan Muyu ascended the throne after going through hardships and dangers. With the princes watching him covetously, let alone having other thoughts, he was even a little busy with his own throne. How could he dare to be the first bird? For the next 10 years, the world was peaceful and there were no more disputes.